best podcast, the Heidelcast.
It's a Heidel minicast. And now, Scott Clark.
Him, her, whom, he, she, it really matters.
If the Heidelcast helps you, won't you help us keep it going? Please make the coffer clink by clicking on the PayPal link or by sending a check to Heidelberg Reformation Association, 1637 East Valley Parkway, number 391, Escondido, California, 92027.
You know what? I'm not going to ask anything of you. I just want to say thanks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for praying, and thanks for supporting the Heidelcast. We really appreciate it.
The Heidelcast.
This is part 4 in our Grammar Guerrilla series. If it's not part 4, it's the latest one. Anyway, in this episode, I want to talk about the difference between him, her, whom, he, she, and who. We talk a lot about pronouns now, mainly for political and cultural reasons. Obviously, there are people who put their pronouns in their bio as if it's not obvious, as if your pronoun is an arbitrary thing. People talk about gender, which is a confusion, being assigned at birth. What they mean is sex, and then there's a distinction between gender and sex. So these things have become fraught with a lot of political weight, I guess. And at the same time, we've forgotten how to use them. It's really ironic in a way, right? When you meet somebody and they tell you their pronouns, they're making a political statement and they're putting them right up front. And yet at the same time, we don't really seem to understand how to use pronouns anymore. And we don't know how to distinguish between the different kinds of pronouns. One of the things that I want to try to do in this series is to clear some of these things up. Obviously, not everybody in the world's listening to the Heidelcast. Not everybody in the world's reading the Heidelblog. But you, dear listener, are. And you don't have to goof these things up. And you can get these things right. You can speak more clearly. You can write more clearly. You can present yourself as an intelligent person. And you don't have to sound like you don't know what you're talking about. I think there's some value in that. Since the wizards of educational theory gave up on Latin, as I've been talking about a little bit in this series, as a dead language, as they say, English grammar has declined precipitously, but it doesn't have to be that way. Learning Latin or Greek does improve English grammar, but you can improve your English without learning Latin or Greek simply by making a distinction that you already know about. So if you listen, I'm confident that you'll hear somebody say, probably today, her or him and so did such and such, right? You think, well, what's wrong with that? It's wrong because the forms he and she are the subject case, and her and him are the object case. Subjects and objects are different things. They have different functions. Used correctly, it should sound like this. She threw him out the window. He threw the frisbee to her. The pronouns her and him are either the direct object of the action, something is done directly to them, or the indirect object. In the sentence, he made dinner for her, he is the subject. The dinner is the direct object. He acts directly upon the dinner in making it and then later eating it. The person who received the dinner is the indirect object. They have two distinct roles. This happens frequently with who and whom. People say, I just don't know how to use who and whom. Well, it's not your fault, really. The reason you don't know is because nobody taught you in school how to distinguish between subject and object. Who is always the subject. Whom is always an object, either direct or indirect. So we say, who called, to indicate the person making the call, and to express the person who received the call, we say whom. So who called and whom did he call? And sometimes people trying to be correct but not knowing which is which will use whom for the subject. They're trying, but they've failed because they didn't distinguish between who and whom. Who, again, is always the subject. Who is always the person doing the action. Whom is always, or almost always, there might be some Okay. There might be some crazy construction where whom becomes the subject, but 99.9% of the time, who is the subject and whom is the direct object or the indirect object. And if you can remember that, you can get this right.
Call or text now, 760-618-1563.
For example, Usain Bolt ran so fast that he defeated Fred, comma, whom he has defeated 73 times consecutively. Whom is the object, right? Who is the subject? Who is doing the verb, right? Who is doing the action? Whom is the one to whom the action's being done. If, in the subordinate clause, beginning after the comma, we used who, the sentence becomes ambiguous. So, grammatically, the pronouns he, she, and who are parallel. And the pronouns him, her, and whom are parallel. They have the same functions. If we distinguish between subject and object, which is important in a lot of ways, we'll be clearer and we will avoid confusion. And somebody will object, don't be pedantic. Language evolves. When someone says, her and me went to the mall, we know what they mean, and that's all that matters. Well, it's true that language does evolve, but it also devolves. Not every change is a good change. And if you confuse subject and object, you have chaos and confusion, and that doesn't help communication. The most likely reason that one might say, him and me drank a beer, is that the speaker or the writer doesn't know the difference between subject and object. And that ignorance is likely to show up in other constructions that will be confusing. The objection assumes that grammatical rules are arbitrary and that there's no real relation between reality and language. That's a big assumption, and it's one that we should doubt. There is a real connection between language and the way things are. There are subjects and there are objects in reality, and language reflects that when we use it correctly. Subjects and objects are not the same thing, and they don't perform the same function, at least not ordinarily. There are exceptions, but that's the great thing about exceptions. They test the rule, but they aren't the rule. This gets us back to things like sex and gender, right? Human beings belong to a biological sex. Gender is a grammatical category. Those are two distinct things. And it's true that a small percentage of people are born sexually, biologically indeterminate. A tiny little percentage. But the first thing that every college freshman learns these days is that there are these exceptions, and then they use these exceptions to imply or say plainly, the teachers do, that there are no norms, that it's all arbitrary, and the doctors assign gender, or they mean sex, at birth. And that's just silly. That's contrary to fact. Doctors don't assign anything. They recognize in 99.9% of the cases. They don't assign, they recognize. Same thing with grammar, same thing with objective reality. There are subjects in reality, there are objects in reality. And we distinguish those things in grammar, in language too. And then there is, as I was implying earlier, the old radio commercial, which was correct, by the way, and people judge you by the words you use. When you use the object, where you should use the subject, you sound less intelligent than you really are. So why not express the subject and the object clearly? Who is doing the action? Whom is the object of the action? It's the same thing with he and she and we and they. Those are all subjects. Him, her, us, those are all objects. That's just reality. And language should reflect that.
Thanks for listening. Tune in tomorrow for more from the Heidelcast, brought to you by Heidelberg Reformation Association.org. Don't forget, when the coin in the coffer clinks, the cost of bandwidth shrinks. Copyright Heidelberg Reformation Association. All rights reserved. This is a Heidel Media production.
The best podcast, the Heidelcast.